Suppose you are a leader leading an independence war in your country. Your country is one of the British global colonies, is in the midst of a crisis of destruction. You stand on the street of Philadelphia in 70. Behind you are 13 scattered British colonies. There is no unified government and no decent army. Most of the soldiers only had guns and axes as weapons. The British who colonized you held advanced flintlock muskets in their hands, and 300 warships blocked the coastline. The British in New York alone was more than all your soldiers combined. What's worse is that the colonial plantations are still hesitant to resist. Ordinary people haven't even heard of independence, and even half of them think it's good to follow the British. At this time, you have just been elected as the commander-in-chief. The army didn't even have winter clothes. How would you save your country at this moment? You know that. You can't win a war with just blood and passion. You first put aside your general's heirs to lobby in state legislatures, repeatedly saying that if we continue to be exploited, our children will always be second-class citizens. Finally, you raised the first batch of pay. Then you found Prussian officer von Steuben to help you train the soldiers. Even though the soldiers complained about the strict training hard, you insisted on sweating more and less bloodshed in war. You trained a group of stragglers into a team that could confront the British army head. But problems arose again. The British controlled the seafood, grass, and weapons could not be delivered. To solve the dilemma, you gritted your teeth. You decided to make an adventurous raid. On Christmas Eve in 17, you led your soldiers across the Delaware River in a blizzard to raid the unsuspecting Hessian mercenaries. And soon you won the battle. You not only captured a large number of supplies, but also made the French promise to send troops, but also gave the formerly demoralized colonial people. Saw hope again. Only 40% of people supported independence. On the streets after the war, we're all holding the flag of freedom. Even 12-year-old kids were practicing like soldiers. But the real test was yet to come. The war lasted for 8 years without receiving a penny. They even mortgaged their estates to subsidize. But the army was still a drop in the bucket. Your troops have been owed 3 years' pay. Some soldiers demanded to go home, and some even broke into your tent with knives. A soldier threw a letter in front of you. The paper was worn out. It said that the child was starving to death. When can you send money back? You stared at the words on it and couldn't speak for a while. You silently took out the only pocket watch your father left you, asked him to send it home for money. You told the soldier that for national independence, I'm willing to risk everything. When the war is won, I promise every citizen, everyone will have more wealth and dignity than before. That night, you wrote 12 letters to state legislatures until your fingers were stiff and couldn't hold a pen. Finally, you joined the French fleet, surrounded the British General Cornwallis in Yorktown. When Cornwallis surrendered his sword, you didn't let the soldiers cheer, but instead you saluted to the sky. You knew that this sword was not lost to you, but to the people who no longer wanted to be slaves after the war. New problems arose. 13 states were like 13 independent kingdoms. They fought for territory and tariffs. They wouldn't even have the right to tax, and you couldn't even pay the pensions of the soldiers. Someone advised you to be king. Only you can calm the situation, but you burned the letter of advice. You said, we went to study. We fought for freedom, not to replace a new king. You led a constitutional convention, and the delegates quarreled for 3. Zhou wanted to count votes by population. Zhao Zhou was afraid of being bullied. The North opposed slavery. The South feared loss of profits. You sat at the main position of the table and patiently listened to everyone. Even if someone slapped the table and you just handed them a glass of water, saying we should think more about our descendants. Finally reached a consensus and formulated the world's first written constitution, and in 1789 was elected unanimously as the first president. The first thing you did after taking office was to refuse the title of your majesty and ask people to call you president. You donated half of your salary to the treasury and refused any extravagance. In 8 years, you personally formulated foreign policy, insisting on not forming an alliance with any European to allow the young country to develop safely. You also promoted the construction of roads, allowing children in remote areas to study, so that farmers' grain can be transported to cities. You also established a postal system, let farmers in remote areas can also receive letters from them. In 17, you voluntarily gave up re-election and returned to Fulong Villa as a farmer. You said that the position of president should not belong to one person, but belongs to the whole country under your leadership. You have changed from a colony that couldn't even make weapons to a country that can produce 5 million pure tea, about 136,001 tons, and owned 10 naval warships. In 1799, you caught pneumonia from a cold. You told your family before not to hold a grand funeral for me, and used the money to build schools and roads. So you led the country to independence. Great changes have taken place here. You built 1,200 miles of roads and shortened the time. Philadelphia from 21 days to 7 days. You built the first public university, allowing children of commoners to study. In 1775, there were only 2 universities. By 1800, there were 24. The literacy rate of citizens rose from 10% to 71% in 1800. In 1775, you didn't have a single warship. In 1800, you already had a navy to protect the coastline. You served for 8 years. You didn't build a palace for yourself and never sought a position for your family, but you left the country. The rule of 2 terms for the president, leaving behind the belief that everyone, the right to pursue. People say you are the father, but what you cared most is always the people on this land, whether they can live with dignity. You proved it with your life. True greatness is not standing at the top of power, but to make every ordinary person can walk with their heads held high on their own land. The country you founded is called the United States, and your name is George Washington.
Live for yourself? The memories between us